Hi everyone, it's Paulie here. So I've been looking at some games recently, and I'd mentioned Mythras, which had sprung from the well of RuneQuest. Now, the guys that did Mythras, Eon, are doing a few different interesting kind of settings. They've set Mythras up as a like a universal playing system, and they brought out this rather delightful one, which I just wanted to share with you all. Worlds United. I really enjoy this because it's a game that's filled with sort of some real hope and positivity and energy, and I think you'll like it. So these guys, this is the design mechanism and so on, and what they've done is they've done this to go with Mythras, but you can use this for any D100 based basic role-playing system. You can roll it over into any system you want, but the mechanisms that are written down in this, they'll work for basic roleplay, they'll work for any of the D100 redos like Revolution that I covered before, or you can use it, you can just use straight RuneQuest or whatever you feel like. So what they've done is they have set up a science fiction game set in the 50s, and they've tried to base this on the planetary romance genre, which is one of my favorites. So planetary romance and a subversion of that which we'll call inhabited solar system. So in the way back when, you remember John Carter of Mars and these sorts of things, there was essentially a science fiction branch which had people going to alien worlds, and these alien worlds tended to have primitive cultures on them. They had some surprising technologies, often ancient things that were left over, but Barsoom, for instance, this is a sword-waving culture, but they've got flying ships and some super science which they can use. So the inhabited universe ones you will probably remember from like all those sort of 50s science fiction-y things where for some reason every planet in the solar system has races on it. There are people living on Venus, there are people living on Mars, there are people living on the moons of Saturn. Sometimes they might be human, sometimes they might be non-human, but and if you jumped off in a place, for some reason everywhere had oxygen. So this is kind of what they've taken their leap from. But the thing about all of those is that they had at their heart this core of positivity and heroism. A single person can make a difference. A group of characters can overthrow an evil despot and save a world. You can leap in there and you can save that princess, and she will have the scientific knowledge that is needed to repair the air generators and keep the planet going. A very positive, very buoyant, heroic ethos to it all. It's a child of its times, and I love it. And that's what they've done in this. So as you'll see from these pictures at the front, what they said is the War of the Worlds happened. So a whole bunch of crystals. Well, first they based this both on The Crystal Egg by H.G. Wells and, of course, War of the Worlds. So why is this important? Well, we all know War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds, where Martian cylinders appear, tripods, black gas, heat rays, boom. They all die of like influenza. But there was also The Crystal Egg, which was a story where there was a psychic crystal that began to sort of echo powers from the Martians and so on. And people who concentrated on it began to get powers. So the idea is Martians landed, they did their thing, they all dropped dead of athlete's foot, which they did readily because they all had tentacles, so they had 8 feet. And but they brought some human slaves from Mars, which they were using for food when they first arrived. And there's a progenitor race, also a hallmark of the inhabited solar system style, and they spread humans from Earth to the other planets and so on. So there are humans on Venus and Mars. The Martians, there are also some sinister Martians we haven't seen, like winged Martians and so on, who are even creepier. But the Martian slaves, many of them, died of disease, but some of them did not, and they kind of showed Earth how to use these technologies. You then got a World War I kind of happened, similar to our one, but it used some of these technologies, black gas, heat rays and so on, and it was so terrible that they decided age of war is over. Nix, nada, yeah, we're not doing this ever again. And so they created the equivalent of the League of Nations, but in this case it's Worlds United. And that is a giant forum for all the nations to get together. Now, it's kind of a nice buoyant world from there, because African nations and so on, because they've sprung forward from colonialism, which had to be let go, back in the 1890s. So you've got Central African nations who are doing very well. They've industrialized, and this is a world where racism doesn't exist and sexism doesn't exist. We've all put that behind because we're all being progressive, and it's set in the mid-50s. And they've developed technologies onwards, and now we've got atomic-powered spaceships. But you've also got psychic powers are starting to come in amongst the population quite commonly, and women, of course, are as likely as men to have psychic powers. So, sexism had to disappear because women can do stuff that any man can, and so you've got these lovely technologies, and people begin exploring the universe. They're worried about the Martians, and in what was our World War II period, that was when the Martians came back and tried invading the Earth again. We kicked their asses, and this war took up our 30s, 40s, and we took it to Mars, and it ended up with nuclear weapons being used on the Martians. There are some Martian survivors that we don't know. We think they got them all, but they're actually hiding in caverns under Mons Olympus and so on. Now, the difference in the world, apart from sort of this positivity and so on, is the Soviet Union. Because Lenin and so on, they still had their communist revolution, but that sort of didn't work out. And when Stalin took over, with all these technology changes and all this sort of this psychic growth of powers in people, he kind of flipped the other way with this whole kind of social Darwinism thing. So the Soviet Union isn't communist, it's capitalist taken way too far. They've decided that basically those people who are superior because it's kind of evolution that they should be so, and lower orders and so on. The idea is initially it went from trying to do a revised, gentler, quote-unquote communism, where they just said, you can have private stuff, but when you die, you don't transmit that on. Everyone has to start from scratch, so it's going to be this Darwinian kind of claw up from nothing. Everyone starts with nothing. But then they decided that certain people are obviously superior, so we'll allow them to. So it builds oligarchs. So now you've got this oligarchic Russia with this class system of oligarchs who run this, and everyone. So they're still nasty, and there's a Cold War going on against these guys because they're bloody horrible, and they are the kind of the enemy in the Cold War in this. But what we've got are these technologies, and these are these beautiful ships. I love them. So they're pointy ships that take off on their tails, the way the way the Godfish and Robert Heinlein surely intended, but they've got wings and so on, so that they glide in as they come in. And of course, nose art. Yay! Everyone's got nose art. You can have psychics who provide some extra kick. So these actually are obviously reactive drives, and you have fuel problems. They're using hydrogen as reaction mass and so on. But there's a psychic drive as well. You can have crystals, and they just add about 1/20th, or I think it's 1/200th of a G to the thrust, which doesn't sound like much, but over a long trip to somewhere like Mars, it does make it faster. So they've explored sort of out to the asteroid belt and so on. Some probes have been sent out, but some things are advanced, some things are primitive. So computers are still pretty bad. Computers are like 1968 level bad. The smallest computer anyone has seen is the size of a filing cabinet, and they're not really in use much. A starship might have one because they're very useful for calculating courses, and they're used for assembling government statistics, but people don't use them. There's no internet. There are some universities who've linked their computers together so they can talk, and that's about it. So it's this wonderful thing. You've got people on Venus, and you've got lizard people on Venus, and Ophidians, snake people on Venus. Some of these guys, the snake people in particular, tend to be quite psychic and so on. And there's dinosaurs on Venus, dinosaurian-style creatures and so on. So there's some of these people are primitive, but some of them have these city-states that have been contacted by humans, and that diplomacy has begun, and these people are part of World United, and they're starting to send their people to earthly universities to study, and people are starting to study with the Venusians, so they're starting to come into our society. They kind of rehabbed people on Mars, but there's been a bit of a the Soviet Union has tried doing some sort of colonialism on Mars and setting up their own areas. So there's this kind of Cold War thing going on. Some probes went out, but they're not, the technology for TV and so on isn't particularly good. It's kind of 50s sort of stuff. So they've sent back some information from places like Pluto, where it looks like there might be these ancient ruins on Pluto, which Pluto might have come in from outside of the solar system and just been caught. There's possibilities for absolutely alien life living on places like Titan, which does have like an ammonia methane atmosphere. They've sent a probe down and it just sent some vague pictures that look like something holding some kind of tools running past. So they've set up this world where you can do intelligence and spying and espionage. You've got these nasty Russian guys and so on. You've got a Cold War. We've got adventures out in space that we can do. We can run out and do all kinds of nifty things. We can explore Pluto. We can go out and explore the moons of Saturn and so on. There's mysteries in the Venusian things and whatever. It's a lovely character generation system where you've got lots and lots of extras. It uses your basic D100, but it adds in lots of cool charts for character background, character color, what psychic powers that you've got, what things have happened to you and your family. So it brings in some really rich color. This is a really great effort. You can tack this onto any D100 system you want. It's a nice, bright, buoyant universe full of adventure. Take a look. It's a really good setting idea. These guys have done several other settings, which we'll take a look at. They've done some sort of Byzantine-based ones and some that are based on sort of Renaissance Italy and so on. But this one I really like. This is a great little, that 50s positive space thing with your winged spaceships and, you know, psychic powers and dinosaurs on Venus and, you know, let's try and save these Russians from themselves and bash an oligarch on the chin and save that gal and, you know, with my best pal, the lizard man, hanging out with me. Oh, it's a great little setting. Go and have a look. Go and have a look. Worlds United. Design mechanism, and I'll put all the links down there so you can find them. Some great gaming. Cheers.